So last week we celebrated a pretty cool milestone. We hit the 60th episode of the YVR Remo show, which was a big moment for us. I mean, honestly, we started this thing out not like an accident, but just as a test trial to see how long people wanted to listen to three guys just chat about mortgages and Vancouver real estate, just chat and talk. And since then, it's expanded. We've covered different territories, different cities across the country, mostly throughout BC, but we've talked about real estate investing. We've talked to fantastic local agents who are blowing up their businesses. We've talked to so many unique and interesting people. And I just reflect back today, and I'm just so thankful that you guys are hanging out with us and you've hung out for 60 episodes now. If this is your first episode, we are bringing a second time guest on the show to talk about a different topic, and a topic that we have had a lot of success with as just generally ourselves as investors, but additionally with a lot of our clients asking about, which is investing out of town. Now, again, a lot of people are looking into things like buying a vacation property. Some are just moving out of town in general, but with the equity growth we've seen in real estate in the past few years, the biggest question is, what do I do with it? Where can I invest my money and where can I put it? And that's why a lot of people are drawn to working with our team at Thrive Mortgage Co., because we care, and this is something that we know and we talk about. So for this episode, we brought on Michael Ponte of Prosperity Investments. Now, Michael runs an online Facebook group. It's dedicated to helping investors learn and grow, and gives back quite a bit. But more importantly, he's been in the investing space for about 20 years now, because this is something that we are interested in, and we love to show people even just the entry level of how to get into this and buy just one extra property to create wealth. We thought it was a great idea to have Michael come back on for a second time around, because he was such a great guest the first time, and talk a little bit about some of the things that he recommends for people who are thinking about investing out of town and why you should be considering it. So you think you're going to like this episode? If you're someone who's thinking about that, if you want to know a little bit more about how to set that up, and just generally speaking about wondering about some different places in the country to start looking. So with that being said, as always, we ask one thing if you're loving the show. Actually, I'm going to ask two things. I'm going to be a little bit greedy today. Number one, I'm going to ask you to leave a 5-star review on iTunes. So appreciated if you do, if you're loving the show. It helps us a ton. And number two, and this is actually not number two, it's share the show with somebody. Share it out on Instagram, tag us up. Again, I'm the Mortgage Pug. We got Dean Lawton, Thrive Mortgage Co., YVR Remo Show. Pick anything, just tag us and make sure to do so. We'd love to hear your guys' feedback and connect with our audience. Let us know what you're liking and want more of. But that being said, we got a review that we want to post up and talk about, and whoever wrote this review is going to get a delicious bag of coffee with us with one of our lovely Thrive mugs. Plus, we got a new version of the Thrive mugs coming out real soon, new design for all of our podcast guests and listeners. So this one says, awesome show, great podcast, loving it during the pandemic, and also just to educate myself in general. You guys had a friend of mine in Lisa Stewart on, which was such a crazy surprise. Thanks for your time and the incredibly great show. Cheers, Jordan. Jordan, thank you so much for listening to the show. Thank you for the review. Please send us your message on at Thrive Mortgage Co. or at YVR Remo Show on Instagram, and we'll make sure to send you a mug. I hope you guys enjoy the show here with Michael Ponte. See you on the other side. What's up, guys? You are listening to the YVR Remo Show, where we talk all things Vancouver real estate and mortgages, take boring topics and make them interesting. Make sure to stay tuned to listen to everything you need to know how to put cash back in your pocket, create wealth in real estate, and simplify the complicated. Mike from Prosperity Real Estate Investments back again on the show. Did you actually know, Mike, that you're our second-time guest on the show, or two-time guest on the show from what I can think of? Look at you go.
Honored. Absolutely honored, buddy. It's got to mean something, or I don't know, maybe, I don't know. Maybe I didn't do a good job the first time around. It's got to bring it back, right? So
I think it's the shirts, man. You show up every time prepared. You got the slick shirts, looking good as always. I like your preparation. Nothing better than that, coming prepared, and even more so with the whole presentation. So, man, there's so much good stuff to chew on today. I'm really excited for you to hop on and share your information, your education, your value. If you're listening to the show right now, I want to do a little plug at the beginning of the show. Of course you're listening. When you're listening to the show right now, check out Facebook and look for groups. There's a group that Mike runs, and it is called Savvy Investors. Is that right, Mike? Did I get that name right?
Yep, Savvy Investor, so singular.
Savvy Investor. If you're interested in investing investing, whether it's a first-time investor, second-time investor, someone seasoned, check out Mike's group. He's done a fantastic job of curating a lot of content and some great people, and he's not out there trying to sell you all day. He's just giving a lot of education to people. So check that out before you go any further or once you finish this episode. Anyhow, right into it. We're talking about investing outside of your city, investing across the country, realistically being an out-of-town so-called investor. And the reason that we've got you on the show today is because this is something that you know about. This is something that you've done, Mike, and it's something that in a conversation I had with Derek earlier today, we're seeing. Well, we just see it a lot right now, a lot. Maybe partially we attract it just because of the clients that we're working with, but a lot has to do with the market and the climate. Derek, maybe share a little bit about the conversation you had earlier today that just led right perfectly into this interview.
Yeah, so I mean, everyone knows what's going on in our local real estate. Values are going higher and higher and higher, and a lot of people are actually getting priced out of the market, believe it or not. A lot of people can't even afford, or they don't qualify for that condo, or they don't have the down payment, or whatever the situation might be. Or a lot of people, it's a lifestyle thing, right? Like maybe they need that detached home and they just can't qualify or they can't afford, but they still want to get into the market. So a good friend of mine actually called me today. He's been thinking about getting in, been watching the market. It's just gotten to a point where it's out of reach for him. And so he totally flipped the script and he wants to buy something out of town. He wants to buy an investment property. He knows he's probably not going to be able to buy his forever home for probably another 5 years. That's kind of in his plan. But he wants to start this now because he understands, the benefits of getting into the market. So now we're looking at different markets that he never really thought of before, and it'll produce some revenue for him in the short term.
Yeah, and so I mean, right away, that's the type of conversations that we're seeing all day, every single day right now. In addition to the fact that the values of properties in the Lower Mainland are appreciating, and we've got a lot of people who are first, second, or third-time investors just trying to figure out what the heck do I do? Where do I go? Where do I even look? And where do I even start? Again, let's get into it, Mike. What are some of the reasons that you're seeing people start to, aside from what we just mentioned there, step outside of their local communities to start investing?
Well, Derek nailed it right on the money, I think, in a lot of cases. And I think this whole situation with the pandemic has opened people's eyes. And I think it's also provided an opportunity that has never been really available to them now. Is companies right now still working, people are still working from home, but it's the effectiveness that is actually happening where people are actually working from home. And this is the first time companies had been forced to actually accept this. People are working from home and things are still being done and you know what? It's also benefiting a lot of these employees as well. And so for a lot of people, they're just looking at it from an affordability perspective. And if companies are willing to let people live a little bit outside of wherever their office is, and now this may be much more of a common theme that people are now working from home, they no longer need to be living in the downtown Vancouver core, downtown Toronto core. And in some cases, companies are allowing them to work in maybe different provinces or other places, and it's all about affordability. And so if people can live somewhere outside, be it in Chilliwack or Hope, or let's just say I want to move to Halifax or Moncton or wherever, Edmonton, where it's a lot cheaper to buy a property, but still be able to work for their same company, why wouldn't they do that? And I think that's the biggest thing that we're starting to see is people are starting to migrate to different markets where in the past, people are working and they're working their tails off and they're feeling like they're just, just busting their butts in regards to trying to just keep up with the Joneses and keeping up with bills and everything else. And now this has provided them an opportunity to go somewhere else. And then having interest rates the way they are today is kind of a double-edged sword. It's just this is becoming a huge opportunity where people are like, you mean I can work from home? I can live further out, that I can afford something more. And then last but not least, look at these interest rates. We've never seen interest rates this low ever. So it's kind of a compounding effect that's actually occurring. And we're not just seeing this in the Lower Mainland, just so everybody's aware. We're seeing this literally kind of coast to coast. This is a phenomena that we've yet to see, or I haven't seen in 20 years of investing, to be really honest with you. It's unbelievable what we're seeing right now. So
yeah, it's cool that you bring that up. I think a lot of people, myself included, when you think about investing out of town or moving out of town, you kind of think Okanagan, right? Or the island or Kamloops. You don't really think about Alberta and Ontario and the Maritimes. Who thinks of the Maritimes, right? But as you were just saying, and I want to dig into that a little bit further, the markets out there and what you can actually achieve in those markets is absolutely insane. So if you can make it work and your lifestyle suits that, it could be a great move for a lot of people.
Yeah, so let's talk on that for a second. Like traditionally, people in the lower mainland market, if we're talking about them in particular, would start to look at, again, local areas such as the Okanagan, such as areas of the island, which there are still lots of good opportunities. Additionally speaking, what you mentioned right away, which was Edmonton. Edmonton has been kind of a hot spot for investing opportunities for a number of years now. With opening up so many different markets and so much change going on. One of the challenges that's occurring for a lot of people that I'm talking to is like indecision. There's just too many options now. There's too many ways. Is it a good idea to still go here? Is it not a good idea to still go in this area? But ultimately, it's a fantastic idea to look at a number of these places for different reasons now. But I want to hear a little bit more about, from your perspective, like how you're helping people navigate where they should start looking. Like, what are you telling people? How are we pinpointing that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it starts back, like for those of you that are looking to invest and you're looking at different markets. The one thing, you look in the lower mainland, just so everybody know, I am based here too. I live in Langley. So Alex and I were really throwing a rock at each other pretty much. And Derek, I'm sure this is not far from you too. But the reality is, when you're looking at our own backyard, and you are looking to buy an investment property here, it's always about kind of appreciation in this particular market. And, prices have been going up here in the lower mainland since I think 2001 was what the number is. And it just has not stopped. We had a little dip in 2008, 2009, very small, nothing really significant. Biggest issue is cash flow. It's just never been able to produce a really good, strong cash flow play unless you put more money down as a down payment. Where other markets, it's kind of an eye opener for a lot of people when you start to explore and you're like, you know what, I want to invest in property, but I'm looking for an income stream and yet another income stream. I want my wife to no longer work or something like that. And they've got all this equity that's built in their home and they're looking for ways to kind of diversify, but more importantly, is trying to generate another income stream that's not necessarily a second job or a third job, God forbid. And so this is where real estate comes in. But when you start to look in your own backyard, and Derek, you referenced it, like, you go to Kelowna, you go to Victoria, you go to Kamloops. Guess what, guys? This story is no different, really. And if anything, it's very nominal. And the biggest problem that you're facing is prices are still extremely high in these areas. But for a lot of people locally, the reason why they only look kind of like a 3 hour, 4 hour drive away is because it's only a 3 or 4 hour drive away. People want to see it. They physically really want to see this. And it's out of their wheelhouse to say, I got to go and drive to Edmonton or fly to Edmonton, or there's a plane to Edmonton or somewhere else. For whatever reason, that's an inconvenience. But if you set up the systems right appropriately at the very beginning, it's definitely doable, number one. And secondly, it just may provide you with those opportunities that you're looking for when you're looking for your investment property, be it cash flow. And for a lot of investors, that's what they're looking for. It's like, I'm looking for cash flowing properties, or I'm looking for something that I can buy that's more affordable. Like, let's look here, $1 million in Vancouver, it's not getting you very much, to be really honest with you. You can buy like a smaller single family home and you can get away with this. And I'll share, I got a property right now under contract out in Moncton, and I'm not promoting Moncton. I'm just sharing you with what it is, but it's a 12-unit apartment building. Okay. 8 2 bedrooms and 4 singles. I bought that for $950,000. And that might be just shocking for a lot of people that are local here. But these are some of the differences, is why you start exploring some of these different types of markets, is because they can provide other opportunities that we may not be much more accustomed to, but more importantly, it fits some of those objectives and those goals of the reason why we didn't invest with to begin with. So that's the reason why people should be. And that's the main piece that I highlight with a lot of people. It's like, what's the objective? What's the goals? And then if it's not able to be accomplished within your own backyard, branch out, look a little further. Don't hesitate to get outside of your comfort zone and outside your box. So
that's really good information. So, I mean, you're obviously really experienced in this, right? You probably have a really good process and a system down and the people that you work with out of town. For somebody like myself, let's say I have no experience with Edmonton or Moncton or wherever it might be, what is a first step? Like, where is somebody going to even just to start the conversation to figure out what they need to do?
I think the big piece is, start to connect with other people, like first and foremost, but it's not to take their information on face value. So, let's say Alex is investing in Edmonton, Derek, let's say you're investing in Hamilton, Ontario, and you're saying that's the end all be all. Connect with other investors, be involved with other, like, be it Facebook groups, join us on Savvy Investor. You're more than welcome to join us. It doesn't cost anything, and connect with other investors that are doing this. But by connecting with these individuals, you just get a chance to learn about what other people are doing, and seeing why they're doing it and the reasons behind it, by connecting with those individuals. And then by getting some of that insight and say, okay, so Alex is investing in Edmonton, and I can't remember which one I said to Derek, I think Hamilton or whatever in Ontario. But the reality is I would take that information and do my own research and figure out, okay, what's happening in Edmonton? What's driving real estate prices? What's happening with rents? Is the economy doing well there? And for me, the big number that I'm looking at right now, especially during COVID, is in migration, or migration that's happening within province to province. And it goes right back to affordability. Where are people moving to in these smaller communities that is driving real estate prices? So I'm paying very close attention to that. And the second part is, where are those jobs being created? What types of big jobs? Is there job loss or not? So it's just taking a little bit of time to doing some research, and it's more economics more than anything. Job growth, unemployment rate. I'm wanting to know what's happening with real estate prices, what's going on with rent. Is there a lot of rent control? So like what we're seeing in Ontario with rent freezes, not a really great place to be investing right now. This is my own two cents. Kind of scary a little bit when the government's having some control in regards to rents. But at the same time, that's when I start to kind of position myself first and foremost, Derek. It's like, let's understand this market. I want to know it very clearly. What are those neighborhoods that I need to be aware of, the good, bad, and the ugly, as I share? Because we're here, but in this day and age when we have access to the internet, there's so much information, as you guys are all aware. There's great, if you go to the municipalities, you talk to the economic development officers within the city in itself, they can provide you all great sources. Always avoid this town because this one's pretty scary, or take a look at this area, this is up and coming. There's a new Walmart that's being created or being built, and there's all this new construction. Okay, that's probably a good sign where there's a good community that's being established there. And so it's almost knowing the market that you're about to invest in better than your own backyard, like where you live. So take the time to just do some research first and foremost before you start to jump in.
So from what I'm hearing from you, the first step obviously is to start having conversations, start connecting with people. The second thing that I heard from you is to do a little bit of local research in those areas and cities, online through the cities, city halls themselves, and then start to talk to people locally, whether it be a real estate agent or otherwise. Now, just kind of going back to what Derek said, a lot of people, especially locally in British Columbia per se, and I'm sure this is the same as people in Toronto as an example, having access to so much equity in our homes, there's a lot of opportunity to pull that equity and to start making these decisions to start investing, which I think is a fantastic idea for a lot of families. And so that kind of leads me back to one of my key points is we've been fortunate to live in these cities where we have grown the appreciation, which allows us to pull and then purchase another property. And this is one of the key maneuvers that we use in real estate investing, which is to pull capital to obviously purchase another property. So from that perspective, one of the questions that I often get asked from people is, okay, well, I don't know if I want to go to Edmonton or Halifax because I know we might have a mini boom right now, but when COVID's over, it could flatline, and which is a fair point to say. So what about those cities that just surround the major city centers? What about the Kelownas? What about the Kamloopses of the world? What about the maybe not Victoria's, but what about the Campbell Rivers and so forth that are maybe a couple hours from each of these cities? What do you tell people about that type of out of town investing, and what are your thoughts there?
It goes to the same principle, Alex. It's like, what's happening? Do we see a lot of migration happening there? And that's the key, is do we see people moving out to those particular communities in those particular areas? So if we're seeing that population growth, that's good. That's good for us as investors. That means real estate prices are going up and rent prices are going up as well. But if we're seeing an exodus or a flat in the market, then technically we may not be seeing some of those trends that are actually happening. So it's really important to kind of pay really close attention to where that migration is actually happening. By understanding migration, or here's another big one, is if there's a major job announcement that's been created, like something really big, major construction jobs where people will want to go work there. And again, they're going to be in that close community. That's really where you want to be paying some attention to. But what we're seeing right now with COVID is some of these smaller communities are having those mini booms. They really are. That's happening right now. So it's just really important to pay close attention. And these are interesting times, as you guys are all well aware. We don't know what's going to happen. There's probably more questions than answers, especially when it comes to real estate. Because here's the funny thing: the unemployment rate that we're seeing right now is the highest we've ever seen in I don't know, for forever right now with Canada. We've got a lot of people that are on EI or previously with CERB. Look what the announcement here locally with BC. Again, another shutdown yet again. How is that going to impact the economy? And that's just BC. I would imagine that's probably going to get rolled out on a national level. So there is a lot of question marks that are going to be had. And I don't think the clarity that we had in statistics is super clear because the COVID effect of what's happened. It's not a normal economic time. And so to have some of that clarity, it's not fully visible. So for us, and what I'm paying attention to is exactly what I've just referenced. It is migration, is where are people moving? Do we see this trend happening where people are getting out of major cities, be it Vancouver as an example, or maybe downtown Toronto, to move to the outskirts, to get outside a little bit further. And now with companies more than willing to support that because the work from home is just a common thing right now. So could I see markets like, say, for example, Harrison probably grow? I definitely could. Why couldn't it be? Maybe people are working from Vancouver, but guess what? They have to, maybe they're able to work 4 days a week at home, and maybe they have to go to the office 1 day a week. That's probably pretty palatable, but think about the difference in prices that they would have compared to a place in Vancouver. So I would absolutely keep your eyes open, be very cognizant and be very cautious of what's happening with the economy and migration in some of those smaller communities, because right now I do see a big push into some of these smaller communities, especially out here like in the Fraser Valley where we're based. So
yeah, that's good information. So just on a couple things that you brought up, like typically historically, if someone wants to buy an investment property, you got to kind of manage it and decide what it is that you want from that property, right? Like some people go into it purely for cash flow. Other people might not necessarily want or need the cash flow and they're looking for appreciation, and that's like a downtown Vancouver maybe purchase. So with everything that's happening and people migrating out, are you starting to see in some of the markets that you're working in, are you starting to see these dramatic appreciation and value climbs as well? So that could be a really good buy for somebody. Whereas, historically they buy in Edmonton and they're not really expecting appreciation, but now they might start to see it.
That's exactly what we're seeing right now. So it's exactly that. So we're seeing these different markets that, again, we talk about interest rates and we talk about affordability, and some of these markets that have been depressed for a while. So again, we talk Edmonton. Just recently, we're seeing increases in valuation. Calgary, that's been a real challenging market for a long time. This last 3, 4, 5 months, we're seeing prices going up. It's a very interesting phenomena that's actually happening, and really a lot of people are moving just because of affordability and they have the ability to work outside. So the answer is absolutely yes. And pretty much any of these smaller communities, even some of the markets that were kind of sleepy, we're seeing appreciation in many of these markets right now. It's quite interesting.
So do you have an example of maybe Calgary or Edmonton of what type of appreciation is actually happening right now? Like obviously we all live in Langley and it's been just dramatic, right? Absolutely dramatic gains over the last 3-4 months. What are you kind of seeing in those other markets?
Well, I don't have the stats exactly in front of me, but if you guys go to my recommendation for anybody that's looking at some of these different markets and you want to look at appreciation variances, there's a lot of these reports every month. Calgary Real Estate Board, Edmonton Real Estate Board, there's some great statistics in most major markets. I think Calgary, the last one that I saw, I think it was just last week or earlier this month, I think we saw about a 5.9 or just under 6% appreciation, where a market was actually depressed. And in Edmonton, I thought it was roughly around 7.2%. But again, when you're comparing it to Vancouver, that's nothing. But in those particular markets, that's a big change because it's been actually flat for years, and in a lot of cases in decline, and just based on those two markets in itself, right?
So do we have any concerns kind of looking forward? I mean, again, assuming a lot of people, well, one of the primary reasons we should probably note this, that people start to look out of town for a cash flow, or sorry, for a real estate investment is cash flow, like you started off talking about. And so I guess my thoughts here are, given the fact that this could be a quote unquote mini boom, and we're not asking you to be an economist all of a sudden here and predict that. That being said, there could be obviously the inverse effect in 3 to 5 years if things clear up really quickly and people start to miss their friends and family in the cities and so forth. And obviously anything can happen, so that's fine. But how are you looking at some of these cities and these places to actually determine which ones make the most sense? Like, do you have like a Mike's? Again, you gave us some examples of where employment is increasing, where there's construction and so forth. But is there anything else like that we should be looking for as far as rent values? choose property types? Anything that's a little bit more bulletproof than something else, for example?
Yeah, like the other piece that you want to like when you're looking at acquisition, and I'm a big believer that you make your money on the buy, and so this may be a little bit of a different process. So I'm looking for those types of motivated sellers and those opportunities where there might be some type of distress in a particular property. So then this way, there's always a little bit of cushion in case the market takes a dip. I'm trying to buy something that's under here, so if the market adjusts, then I've got a little bit of a cushion to kind of protect myself. The big piece that I look at when it comes to investing in real estate, and I'm a big cash flow investor, so that's my strategy. And I treat every real estate transaction as a business. And so I want to make sure that the business is generating me income every single month. I don't like a lot of political interference in regards to my ability to increase rent. And at the same time, I don't want limitations as well. So I'm looking for some of that flexibility. For me, if the market even does take a downturn and you're buying with cash flow, technically you're still in a really good position because the property is still performing itself. It's still doing well. If you've got a long-term approach with your real estate investing strategy, tenants are paying the rent, or sorry, tenants are paying down the mortgage, and you're still collecting cash flow every single month. You may not be getting that appreciation lift. Again, this is something that you can't necessarily plan for. The market can change in any market. Vancouver is not Teflon, to be really honest with you. They've had a run for 20 years, which is unbelievable, but that's not normal. It isn't, if you go back in history. And so with that being said, any slight downturn can have an impact right off the bat. So I think the important part is to make sure you're buying right. Sometimes it's challenging when you're dealing with multiple offers and those types of circumstances that are coming along with it. But the important part is, for me anyway, try to buy right. That's really, really key. When it comes to investing, some of the better segments to be looking at, to be honest, is if you can have something that has multiple streams. So like say, for example, up and down suite, or, for us that have here in Vancouver and Surrey, they've got that carriage home as well in the back in the garage. So you're getting 2 or 3 possible income streams. So this way, if you got one vacancy, you may be only 33.33% vacant versus just one house, one renter. So when it becomes vacant, you may be 100% vacant, and God forbid the rental market changes, and then all of a sudden now you're really, really impacted. So anything that you can do for yourself to try to get multiple streams, the better it's going to be for you from an income side. So
yeah, that's a real good call out for the cash flow that you noted right there. To your point, having multiple unit properties, and I always suggest, to your point, one of the great ways for people to get started with that is exactly what you mentioned, an up and a down. So a property that can be converted with a suite or has a suite in it. It's a great, comfortable way to get moving along. And there's a lot of them out there, which makes it a lot easier to find them. So that being said, I just want to suggest, like, to a lot of people who are, if you're listening in the Lower Mainland, or if you're in one of the hubs in Victoria or Nanaimo, we're seeing people, like, we just had a client secure a multi-unit property in Kamloops as an example for, I think it was around $700,000. They bought it with their HELOC on their home here that we helped them set up and secure. And those guys, even after paying off the HELOC, they're going to be $1,000 a month cash flow, which is pretty fantastic. So, if you're afraid to step outside of your local city, you might be missing some of the jewels. And the neat thing about it, Mike, to your point, the neat thing about like a Kamloops versus, let's say, going to Moncton, New Brunswick, is you can still touch it, feel it, see it. You're 3 hours away if you live in the city. And additionally, I feel like, again, if you've done your research, you'll know that that's a city that is going to continue to see some form of appreciation, which is kind of neat. Do you often see people, or how do you feel about the idea of someone almost making like a junior step of the out of town, like an out of town as in maybe a few hours away instead of across the country?
I totally agree with it too. I think anybody that's just starting to get to do this, take baby steps in this approach, and sometimes, it's all about that comfort zone, because, for a lot of people, if you live in Vancouver and you want to invest in Kamloops, then it's far enough away where the process is no different than you are in Edmonton, for example. You will most likely need to have a property manager out there. You will have to manage that property manager. So it kind of gets your feet wet a little bit, but at the same time, you can drive out there. And so it's not a significant variance. But put some things into perspective, guys. Okay, so you're going to go to Kamloops. That drive is about 4.5 hours, something like 4 hours, maybe not even 4 hours, but roughly 4 hours. Okay, but you're going to make a day out of it. So 2 tanks of gas, and then you're probably going to be staying at a hotel or something like that, most likely, to go out and see the property. A flight to Edmonton, if you're just looking locally, it's probably about $100-$150. Not a big deal. And I've done that trip overnight, or not even overnight, same day. I go first thing in the morning, go do the things that I need to do, and then come back. or even, sorry, $150 one way, maybe $250, $300 roughly in that perspective. So it's not a significant amount of expense, just so everybody's aware. And I go out to check my properties out every 6 months, to be honest with you. And so I always make that as a trip for myself to go out and make sure all the work is being done. But to answer your question, Alex, yes. You know what? If you're just getting started and you really, really are uncomfortable to begin with, just dip your toes in the water. If you see better markets, be it like in Kamloops, and Kamloops is a very good market, definitely give it a shot, see how it goes. Try to set up systems in place where you are not necessarily needing to be micromanaging. Hire that property manager, build those expenses into your analysis. And then this way, if you really want to grow it, you have the ability to truly scale your business. The better the systems you have in place, the better, more effective you will be as an investor. So.
Yeah, great points. I mean, you've obviously made a lot of good moves in real estate, Mike. I'm personally curious if you can share some maybe flaws or mistakes that you've made, or maybe mistakes that you've seen people make when investing out of town.
Yeah, I think the biggest one is the biggest issue that I tend to find for out of town investors, including myself, is your team. They are instrumental in making sure that your business or your real estate transaction is going to do well. You may acquire right. They've may gone to both of you guys and get fantastic terms when it comes to mortgages and great interest rates and great payments. But at the end of the day, once the acquisition is done, the real work actually begins. And it's to make sure that your tenants are being managed appropriately, your property is being managed appropriately, property managers not being taking advantage of you. So I kind of shared a story like this with Savvy, and I'm not sure if I've shared this with you guys as well in my past, but one of my very first transactions that I hired a property manager in Edmonton. And guess what? Things seemed to be going well. Rent was coming in every single month. It's going into my account every single month. Cash flow's coming in. I'm doing great. Hey, perfect. Everything must be good. I didn't go out to see that property for about a year and a half. And so I went out to go take a look and do an inspection of some of my other properties and knocked on the door on the property with my property manager. You had problems right away when my property manager actually introduced himself to the tenant as well. And so the door opens up and the smell coming out of this house was atrocious. Absolutely. I can't even tell you. And then we walk in and it was, you've probably seen the show Hoarders, right? You've seen all the pretty much it. You walk in and out and it was a disaster. And it was just a small townhouse, nothing big, right? And I'm like, oh my God. And it wasn't that it was super thrashed. It was just a mess, an absolute mess. And so we looked at the property and we're like, something is missing. Where's this smell coming from? And it wasn't until we walked downstairs in the basement where the tenants had a puppy mill running in a townhouse downstairs in a 3-bedroom, 1.5-bath townhouse. Part of our agreement that we have in place is that, they're supposed to go into the property every 6 months to go take a look and do an inspection. Now, technically, you would think I'd be blaming the property manager on there, but that's not his fault. Actually, it's my fault for not ensuring that work that he was actually following through and making sure that he was accountable to his job. And so the other part is, one of the things I preach is, if you're investing in other markets or different markets, you should budget in your analysis that you're getting out to see your property at, roughly every 6 months. That's my honest opinion. And so this way you're ensuring that your team is doing their job responsibly. But here's the fun thing about COVID, it's changed the way we do our business. And with these fancy little gadgets that we have, virtual inspections is becoming a much more common theme. And so right now I'm doing virtual inspections with a lot of our properties right now with individuals. I'm literally walking through the suite by suite, bedroom by bedroom, and doing visual inspections. So guess what? I'm here locally. I can do this literally across the country and still have that same visibility as I did before, but I don't no longer have to travel. Technology's really changed. So I think the important part, and to kind of go back, finding your investment team is extremely crucial. And I always reference that it's like hiring an employee. You need to find the right fit, good credentials, right person. And at the end of the day, as we've all known, if we've ever hired somebody, it's not always guaranteed. So you always need to have backups just in case. So you want to be making sure that your team is solid and just unbelievable. And then at the same time, you just never know. Maybe, Derek, you don't want to be a mortgage broker anymore because you've made so much money or whatever the situation is. But the reality is, you know what? you may now all of a sudden be working with Alex, and you just need to find that other replacement. No offense, Alex and Derek are fantastic people. So, but the reality is you always want to have those backups, especially when it comes to your management. That was a big lesson for me. Cost me a lot of money, but I learned from that, and I made sure that those systems are in place moving forward, and just constantly adapt. And that's the one thing about real estate, as you guys are well aware in the financing world. Things are always changing. Things are always evolving. Things are always happening, and you just kind of have to roll with this, and you just have to adjust. And it's not always going to be perfect, but as long as you're staying on top of this with your systems and building the right people, connecting with the right people, it will be fine. It will be good, and like that's the key aspect. But if you're just burying your head in the sand, that's where problems are going to start to arise.
No different than any business, my friend. No different than any business. If you neglect it, those things will eventually end up rearing their ugly heads. Mike, this has been awesome, man. Really appreciate you coming on and sharing your valuable insight. We picked up quite a bit there. Everything from obviously, biggest mistake, don't pick a crappy team, and then the biggest opportunity, pick a good team there. I think the guys are going to pick up a great amount of information from this actual podcast or episode. And of course, guys, if you like this episode, make sure to subscribe, share, and give us a review. And of course, find Mike Ponte over at Savvy Investor on Facebook or Prosperity Investments. Thank you again, Mike, for coming on. We really appreciate you, my friend. And thanks for being guest number 2.
Love it. Thanks for the opportunity, guys. Always great to connect with you guys. So